webinar that we are organizing. So हमने अभी recording start करी है. So again, I'll repeat myself. A good afternoon and a warm welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. Uh, this is a second webinar that we are organizing, और आज का भी webinar AI से ही related है in a way. So हमने जब लास्ट वेबिनार ऑर्गेनाइज किया था वो था आप एआई के थ्रू एक विजुअली इम्पेयर्ड ही एंटरप्रेन्योर ने आके हमारे साथ डिस्कस किया था कि आप एआई के थ्रू कैसे बिजनेसेस रन कर सकते हैं एज अ विजुअली इम्पेयर्ड। अलग अलग क्या अपॉर्चुनिटीज हैं आपको, फाइनेंशियल्स, आपके टेक, आपके एचआर से लेके आपके हर डी डिपार्टमेंट में सपोर्ट के लिए एआई के थ्रू। आज के वेबिनार में वी आर वेरी फॉर्चुनेट टू हैव मिस्टर नीलेश सिंगित। वो एक बहुत ही डिस्टिंग्विश्ड एक्सेसिबिलिटी कंसल्टेंट हैं, डिसेबिलिटी एडवोकेट हैं। ऑलमोस्ट 2 decades का उनका एक्सपीरियंस है इन दिस एडवोकेसी फील्ड। वो ऑल्सो ही इज ऑल्सो अ मेंबर इन द सुप्रीम कोर्ट एक्सेसिबिलिटी कमिटी, और साथ ही साथ नालसा यूनिवर्सिटी में जो है डिस्टिंग्विश्ड फेलो है इन स्टडी ऑफ डिसेबिलिटीज। साथ ही साथ सर हैज बीन कॉन्स्टेंटली रेजिंग अवेयरनेस रिगार्डिंग द टेक्नो एबलिज्म एंड द एआई बायसेस एट दिस पॉइंट इन टाइम। जो एआई के ऊपर बायसेस हैं उन पे जो है सर कॉन्स्टेंटली काम जो है अवेयरनेस रेज करते हैं अपने वेबसाइट्स और अपने आर्टिकल्स के थ्रू। आज हमारे जो वेबिनार का सब्जेक्ट और द टॉपिक है वो यही रहने वाला है कि एआई बायसेस क्या सच में एग्जिस्ट करती हैं, और साथ ही साथ क्या फिजिकल एक्सेसिबिलिटी क्या मायने रखती है किसी विजुअली इम्पेयर्ड के लिए। रियल वर्ल्ड एग्जांपल्स के थ्रू हम एआई बायसेस को भी समझेंगे, और हम सारे लोग विजुअली इम्पेयर्ड या जो भी पर्सन विद डिसेबिलिटीज हैं वो हम लोग जो है इस टेक्नो एबलिज्म के विरुद्ध क्या कर सकते हैं, व्हाट स्टेप्स वी कैन टेक टू कॉम्बैट दिस टेक्नो एबलिज्म, we'll learn from Nilesh sir. So sir, a warm welcome to you from all the Pixel Power Up community members and the people who are present here. Nilesh sir, can you hear us? If you could just just send on. Yeah, sir, I have again shared asked to unmute you. You could just unmute yourself. Yeah,
Am I audible?
yeah. Now you're perfectly audible.
Yeah. So do I start or are we waiting for somebody?
No, you can start, sir, surely.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to the team at Pixel Power Hub for inviting me to be a part of this second webinar. I am genuinely grateful to communities like yours who are not just consuming technology but are interrogating it, and that is much more powerful position to be in. I also want to say before I get into any substance that I'm aware of whom I am speaking to today. Most of you are not newcomers to accessibility. You are not people who have recently discovered what screen readers are or have just figured how to navigate a poorly labeled button. You have been doing this for years. You know exactly what it feels when an app changes its layout without warning, when an audio description is vague to the point of being useless, when a captcha blocks you and there is no alternative. I will say that again because I think it is worth sitting with. When you have spent hours learning a new workaround, adapting to a new interface, figuring out how to navigate a platform that is just rolled out an improvement, who has actually done the work here? You have. Not the designer, not the developer, you. This is not just inconvenient, it reflects a particular assumption built into the way technology is made, and the assumption has a name: Techno-Ableism. It is a term that sounds very academic, but describes something that is very ordinary, very familiar, and day to day. Techno-Ableism is not simply about technology being accessible, it is a belief, sometimes very conscious, sometimes no, almost unconscious, that disability is essentially a problem to be solved and that technology is the solution. In this way of thinking, the goal is to make disabled people functional as closely as possible to the particular idea of normal. Fix the person, correct the deviation, bridge the gap. What this does is it keeps the question aimed at the individual. The question becomes, how do we help this person to keep up? How do we give them tools to compensate? How do we make them legible to a word that has not was not built for them? The question is the question that is asked never is, why was the world built in the way to begin with? Now, to be fair, I should also say this: technology has brought a real tangible benefits. I do not want to stand here and talk as if all has been a disaster. For many people with visual impairment, screen readers, text to speech tools, navigation apps, digital libraries have genuinely changed what is possible. Access to education, employment, literature, these are not small things. But there is a difference between technology being useful and technology being inclusive. Something can be useful to you while you're still treating you as an afterthought. And I think that distinction matters a great deal. Let me bring in something that many of us have experienced a few years ago: the COVID platform. For those who may not remember clearly, that was a portal through which most of India was expected to book its COVID vaccination. It was mandatory. There was no real alternative. And for a significant number of people with disabilities, particularly those who were visually impaired, the platform presented serious barriers. Captures that had no accessible alternative, image heavy interfaces, timeouts that did not accommodate slower navigation. What happened? Some people managed with help, others waited longer, others were simply left out of the initial waves. And this was not a minor app. This was a public health emergency. The inaccessibility had real consequences. Or then take the very common IRCTC website and app, something many of you probably use. The booking flow, particularly on the app, has improved over the years, but the complaints from screen reader users have been persistent. Dynamically loading content, form fields that are not properly labeled, the way the OTP flow interrupts the navigation sequence, these are not random bugs. They are symptoms of a design process that does not include disabled users from the start. And this is not unique to government platforms, it is across the board. Banking apps, food delivery, government services, e commerce, health portals. I mean, just to name a few. Accessibility is often an afterthought, added later, patched on, and sometimes broken by the very updates meant to improve the product. Now, when we bring artificial intelligence specifically into this picture, the situation becomes even more complex. And it needs to be talked about more honestly than is usually is. AI systems have often presented to be neutral. We are told they are data driven, objective, unbiased, that they learn from patterns and make decisions based on logic rather than prejudice. This is one of the most persistent myths of our time. Here is the reality: AI systems learn from data. Data comes from the world. The world is not neutral. The world reflects centuries of exclusion, normalization, and the assumption that certain bodies, certain behaviors, and certain ways of interacting are the default and everything else is a deviation. So if you train an AI system on data that reflects the world, you do not get a neutral system, you get a system that has learned at enormous scale with enormous efficiency to reproduce those same exclusions. Let me give you a very specific example. There are now AI powered hiring systems being used by companies globally and in India as well to screen candidates. These systems analyze video interviews. They look at eye contact, facial expression, tone of voice, the pace at which you speak, micro expressions. They compare these against a data set of what, into quotes, good candidates supposedly look like. Now, think about what this means for someone who is visually impaired. The way you engage with the camera may be different. The way you look at a screen, the direction of your gaze, the way you orient yourself in a video call, all of this may not match what the system has been trained to recognize as, again, into quotes, confident or into quotes, engaged. The system does not know you're using a screen reader. The system does not account for the fact that non visual interaction with technology looks different. It flags you as anomalous. The system is not broken, it is working exactly as designed. The problem is what it was designed to do. Let me give you another example closer to daily life. Image description tools, which many of you use, have improved enormously, but the gap between what they technically describe and what is practically useful is still very significant. A tool might tell you a group of people seated in a room, but is it a meeting? Is it a classroom? Or is it a religious gathering? Is someone at the front speaking? Is there a whiteboard? Is there an urgency in the room? The context, intent, and social meaning are not captured in a pixel count. And this matters because you're not trying to know what the image is technically, you're trying to participate in the same informational world the sighted users are participating in. When the description falls short, you are excluded, not because the tool does not exist, but because it was built with a very limited idea of what useful means for a visually impaired user. There are also voice assistants and conversational AI tools. Think about how they handle accents. If you have been following the research in this area, you will know that automatic speech recognition systems consistently perform worse for speakers with non-native accents, regional accents, speech patterns associated with certain disabilities like cerebral palsy, or simply voices that were underrepresented in the training data. In India, where English is spoken with enormous regional variety, where Hindi, Tamil, Marathi, Bengali, Gujarati, Telugu, and dozens of other languages are primary modes of communication, this is not a minor issue. It affects whether you can actually use the tool in practice or just in theory. A voice assistant that was trained predominantly on American English and that struggles with a Nagpur or a Coimbatore or a Kolkata accent is not accessible for a large portion of Indian users. And when we add disability to this picture, when we think about someone who has a speech impairment or uses a different space or rhythm of speech, the accuracy drops very low. These are not edge cases, these are majority of people this country actually contains. I want to talk about something that the invitation from Pixel Hub specifically mentioned, the connection between digital accessibility and broader systems. We tend to think of accessibility in a very specific, very digital terms, screen reader compatibility, alt text, color contrast ratios, keyboard navigation. These are very real and important, but accessibility does not begin and end at interface level. Imagine a person who is visually impaired and looking for employment. The job portal is accessible, good start. They apply, the company uses an AI screening tool. Then the tool may or may not be accessible, as we discussed, may not be even trained to read their interaction pattern accurately. They somehow get through. The interview is on a video platform. The platform may or may not work cleanly with their screen reader. They get the job. Now they join the workplace. Is the internal HR system accessible? Is the payroll portal accessible? Are the collaboration tools, the shared documents, the project management software, the internal communication platforms accessible. If one of those links in the chain fails, it creates a problem. And if the organization does not have a culture of accessibility, if disabled employees are expected to raise their issues quietly, to manage and not to make a fuss, then the systemic problems remains invisible. Accessibility is not a feature, it is an ecosystem. And that ecosystem includes physical spaces, institutional processes, legal framework, and cultural norms, not just website and apps. In India, we do have some framework that acknowledges this. The Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016 mandates reasonable accommodation, accessibility in public services, and non discrimination. It explicitly lists a range of benchmark disabilities and places obligation on both government and private establishments. The Rajiv Raturi versus Union of India judgment from the Supreme Court of India is a significant moment. It brought specific enforceable directions for accessibility in public infrastructure, not just aspirational language, actual directions. India is also a signatory to the UN CRPD, which takes that what scholars call a social model approach, meaning it locates disability not in the person, but in the barriers created by the environment. This is a profound shift from how disability was understood historically. Earlier frameworks treated disability as a medical condition requiring charity or rehabilitation. The UNCRPD says no. The problem is not the person, the problem is the world that keeps excluding them. The shift in framing matters enormously when we talk about AI and technology because it tells us exactly where to look for the problem. The framework exists, but implementation has been slow, uneven, and frequently disconnected from the digital space. When Niti Aayog released its AI governance guidelines, there was very little, some would say almost nothing about disability, about accessible AI systems, about including disabled voices in the design of AI policy. My open letter to the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology makes this critique specifically. India is positioning as a global AI power. We are talking about sovereign AI, about making India a hub for AI. India a hub for AI development. But if the development proceeds without disability inclusion, without the RPWD or the UNCRPD as anchoring frameworks, then we are going to build the same exclusions into our AI infrastructure that we have been trying to address in our physical and digital infrastructure for decades. I I mean, I've written to the ministry and I've still not heard from them. A lot of letters have gone from my side. I've even written to the Prime Minister uh, bringing this issue up. Nothing has happened. This is actually a policy failure, and it is one that communities like this one needs to speak up about. I mean, an individual like me can only raise the issue, but I will never be heard. A group like this needs to kind of be visible and make more noise. I do not want to give you a list of 10 things because that is the kind of thing that sounds neat but does not stick. So let me offer you a few thoughts that I genuinely feel are actionable. The first is this: your experience is data. I mean, what we call lived experience. This is not metaphorical, it's literal. When one encounters a barrier in a system, we find a workaround, and we identify a pattern in how a particular kind of interface consistently fails us. That is knowledge. It is precise, it is grounded, and it is often more accurate than what a developer sitting in a testing lab can produce. Do not underestimate it. Document it and share it. The second is push for participation, not just feedback. There is a difference between being consulted at the end of a process and being part of the process from the beginning. The principle, nothing about us without us, is sometimes treated as a political slogan, but it is really a design principle. When disabled users are part of the building, testing, and evaluation of system, not just ask for opinion after the product is already built, the outcomes tend to be more usable and more meaningful. The third is work around collective voice. Individual complaints tend to disappear. They get logged, maybe addressed, often forgotten. I mean, the same, I mean, as I was telling you about my letter to Niti Aayog and the ministry. But when communities like this one identify patterns and speak collectively through disability rights, organization, through legal frameworks, to sustain public engagement, this is harder to ignore. The Rajiv Raturi case did not happen because one person complained. It happened because the issue was persistent, documented, and taken forward systematically. The fourth, and this is something I care about particularly, is critical engagement with AI. This does not mean you have to become an AI researcher or an AI expert. It means developing the habit of asking who designed this? Who is the assumed user here? What data was this trained on? These are not technical questions, these are questions of power and accountability. And they are absolutely questions that users, communities, and civil societies can and should be asking. The fifth, and this one I want to emphasize particularly in the Indian context, is legal literacy. Most technology users, disabled or otherwise, do not know that the RPWD Act places specific obligations on service providers. They do not know that your UNCRPD gives them internationally recognized rights. They do not know that there is a Supreme Court precedent on accessibility. This knowledge matters not because everyone needs to file a court case, but because knowing your rights changes the nature of your engagement. When you write to a company about an accessibility failure, you're not asking for a favor. You're pointing to an obligation. That is completely different kind of conversation. Disability rights organizations like the National Association of Blind, like Saksham, like Samarthyam, have been doing this work for years. Individual users in communities like this can connect with, support, and amplify that work. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. Build on what already exists. The idea that users can challenge ableist assumptions in AI tools through the way they interact with them. Ask a vision tool not just what is an image, but what would be useful for me to know about this image as someone who is navigating a public space. Ask a conversational AI to explain something without assuming visual metaphors. These are small adjustments can sometimes shift the output meaningfully. And they also over time feed into how these systems are evaluated and improved. Before I close, I want to say something about the larger narrative because I think there is a tendency, especially in tech communities, and I include disability tech communities in this, to oscillate between two positions. One is uncritical enthusiasm, AI is transforming everything, inclusion is around the corner, and we wait for the next update. The other is complete rejection. Technology is inherently ableist, nothing will change, the system is designed against us. Neither of these positions are honest and neither of them is useful. The honest position is something like this: technology has real potential, some of it is already delivering, some of it is still failing people. The failures are not random, they are patterned. They follow the same lines of exclusion that we see in every other domain. Who is centered, who is marginalized, who is considered the default, and who is considered the edge case. Disability is not an edge case. Disability is, as the tagline on my website puts it, the ultimate stress test for inclusive technology. If a system works for a diverse range of disabled users, different impairments, different assistive technologies, different contexts, different languages, it tends to work better for everyone. Accessibility done right is not a special accommodation, it is good design. And here is where I want to end. The question I asked at the beginning was, even when we become highly skilled at using technology, are we being made to absorb the cost of the systems that never were designed with us in mind? The answer right now for too many people is that in too many contexts is yes. But this is not a permanent state of affairs. It is a design choice. And design choices can be changed. And when there is enough pressure, enough documentation, enough collective insistence that this is not acceptable, I want to be honest about the scale of this. These changes do not happen quickly. They do not happen because one community speaks up once and then goes quiet. They happen over time through sustained engagement, through building alliances with researchers, with lawyers, with journalists, and with policymakers, with technologists who are willing to listen. But they do happen. The RPOD WD Act is an evidence of itself. The Rajiv Dauturi judgment is an evidence of that. Change is possible. It requires exactly the kind of engaged, informed, and persistent community that you are. Spaces like this, Pixel Power Hub, are part of that pressure. Communities of people who use technology actively, who can identify with precision where it works and where it fails, who are willing to speak about it. These communities matter, not just for disabled users, for everyone who believes that technology should expand human possibility rather than replicate human exclusion.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for Nilesh sir and main host of this webinar. And very warm thanks to you. You give us a very precious time from for this webinar and to answering for various of questions and you tell a very big thanks and very good way. And also a big thanks to participants and all audience we are watching on YouTube after that. And please, if you watching this on YouTube, please subscribe our channel and also we visit our website and check out all tools. And thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you on the other one as well, the next webinar that we'll be organizing.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that we'll update the webinar by next month or this month end, whatever the topic will be. And again, very thankful to Nilesh sir that he came in impromptu invitation and he accepted the invitation and he came and shared his valuable experiences with us. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Thank you.